Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a neighbor bulldozed my mountain property while I was away. He gets taught a lesson. And if you haven't already, please check out my podcast on all major podcast platforms by searching for Ripe Stories, and you will find exclusive content and early access to new stories. I will start this off with some context. When I was 21, I found a really good deal on a cute little cabin up in the mountains near where I currently live with my parents. I had decided I wanted to move out anyway, and I knew I could not pass up such a good deal. The cabin was slightly worse for wear when I first moved in, but the land surrounding it and the views made it so worth it. I spent the next year fixing it up with whatever money I could spare from my job. A couple months near the end of the year, someone moved into the cabin next door. That one was already fully revamped and everything, but much more expensive. Hence why I chose the one I did. So from day one, I was already having troubles with this guy. He kept coming over to borrow things from me, which was okay at first, but after a while, it got annoying. First he needed maybe a cup of sugar and a few eggs, but after a few weeks, when he must have had time to settle in and go shopping, he was asking for a whole carton of eggs, a few loaves of bread and a tray of ice. I caved and gave him the things he needed, but after another few weeks I told him he needed to go shopping because I couldn't afford to keep giving him most of my groceries. This ticked him off and started a whole load of drama. 6 eggs please, he said the following day as I answered the door. Look, I already told you, you need to go shopping, this is getting ridiculous. I responded with a sigh. What? But why? You have the things I need, he stated looking puzzled. Bro, just buy your own groceries and stop leeching off of me. Whatever. He stormed off and back into his cabin, and although that was the end of that situation, another one quickly started. A week later he was back at my house banging on my door. Look here, I own this cabin too, he stated, shoving a piece of paper in my hand. On it were the deeds to his property, including the dimensions of the grounds around his cabin that he owned. Look here, it says 50 meters beyond the left wall of my cabin. He pointed at where it was 50 feet. That says 50 feet, not meters. I sighed as I handed him back the paper. What? But this is my cabin. I own all of this property too, he exclaimed. I have no idea where you got that idea, but you certainly didn't buy this property as well as your own. When I bought the listing for my property, it said it was one modernized cabin and a wooden hut. I pointed over to his property where there was a shed at the end of his front lawn. That's the wooden hut. This is outrageous. You cannot steal my property, he yelled and stormed off. I did not hear anything from him after that point, so I assumed he called up the estate agent or something and realized that he was wrong. This is where the story gets interesting. At the end of the year, I moved abroad for a 2-year education course in the UK. I'm from Canada. I had saved up enough to afford rent while there, but my part-time job covered most of it. Anyway, after the 2 years, I moved back home for the first time since leaving, and I must say I was pretty excited to get back to my house after having spent the past 2 years in less than ideal dorm rooms. I don't own a car, so I got a taxi from the airport up to my cabin. And as I was describing the directions to the taxi driver, we ended up driving right past my property as my cabin was not there. After going too far and realizing where I was, I decided to just get out and walk back. At this point, I had not realized the real reason why I hadn't spotted my cabin. As I was walking back, I started to get this sinking feeling that something was wrong. It was like I had suddenly remembered that my neighbor was a nightmare and I had left him alone with my house unoccupied for 2 whole years. My worst fears were confirmed. I got to my neighbor's house and even saw him in his front lawn, so I knew it was the right house. He did not see me at this point, but when I looked to the side where I was expecting to find my lovely little cabin, there was a completely different house. The building was modern, clearly fairly new, and was rather large, taking up the majority of the land on my property and some of my neighbors. I stood there for a couple of minutes, just utterly confused and thinking I was at the wrong place. But as my mind started to clear and I really acknowledged what had happened, an angry haze quickly replaced the confusion. This was you, wasn't it? I yelled, storming over to my neighbor. What? He asked, and he looked so confused that I thought maybe I had misdirected my anger. My house, what happened to it? I asked, slightly calmer, as I realized he might not have had anything to do with it. I told you it was my property, and when you moved away, I assumed that was you admitting I was right, giving me the cabin. He replied with a shrug and went back to doing some yard work. What? Are you out of your mind? I looked at your deeds and you clearly don't own this land. I could have shown you mine if you needed them. Why did you just destroy my cabin? By the end of my rant, I was hysterical. 1,000 thoughts were running through my head, but the main ones were pure violence. "You left, what was I supposed to make of that?" he asked. "Oh, so because I went away for a while, you thought you would just destroy my cabin, right? What about all of my belongings? Did it not register in your thick skull that there were still things inside my cabin? Because I still own it." I was in between screaming and sobbing at this point. "Oh yeah, I just kept what I wanted. Rest of it went in a skip." He shrugged and then waved a hand as if to dismiss me. My knees buckled under me. I didn't know what to think. I could not speak, could not continue the conversation, so I called a taxi and went to my parents. I told them what had happened and they almost did not believe me until I burst into a meltdown. The next few hours consisted of them helping me finalize some documents to get a lawyer and start a case. Within a day, I had a lawyer and made a case to serve to my neighbor. It would be delivered later in the day that I would be suing him. The next couple of days were silent, but I was constantly on edge, and then there was the knock. It was loud and aggressive, and I knew it was from him. I was home alone, but was not worried at the time. But the second I opened the door, I was thrown onto the floor, and I felt a cold cylinder press against my forehead. "How dare you try to sue me?" my neighbor yelled as he pressed a gun to my head. His eyes were red and filled with veins. I was sure he was on something. I didn't say anything back. I did not know what to say. Adrenaline kicked in and I knocked the gun out of his hands. His reactions were slow, allowing me to knock him out cold. I rang the police straight away, still in a daze, my whole body shaking with fear and adrenaline. They arrived and took him away as well as the gun. They also took me to the station where I was questioned and gave statements. I also told them the whole house story, which they were so shocked by, and even an officer out to check if I was telling the truth. Because of the whole ordeal with the gun, the next few weeks were much easier than they might have been. I was still able to take him to court and it was a very easy case to win. I could easily prove that the property was mine, and although my neighbor tried to claim I had built the house and destroyed my own cabin, the companies who had done the construction came forward with receipts that the buyer was indeed my neighbor. Long story short, my neighbor went to jail with a 10-year sentence and a restraining order from me for when he gets out. He had to pay a very hefty fine for the damages, and I of course got to keep the house. Unfortunately, I felt very weird living in the house he had built, so after a couple of months I packed my bags and moved into a new home miles away that I bought with the settlement money. I donated the home to a local school who could use it for residential trips and activities, and in the end things worked out for me, but I would be lying if I said I was not now scared every time I went on holiday for a short while. And here, Ripe Stars, if you enjoy my daily stories, please don't forget to also check out my podcast. On all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all the others, you will have access to exclusive videos and early access to all the new stories. And the best thing is, it's just for free. Anyway, the next one is a petty revenge story. First of all, I understand leaving something behind in an Uber is a pain in the rear for the driver. Uber has recently added a $15 fee for a driver returning an item, which I completely support, and in the past I've given a driver a $20 tip for returning my item. Now to my story. Late Friday night I left both my phone and wallet in an Uber on my way home from a party. I thought they might have been left at the party, so I waited until Saturday morning to check before reaching out to the Uber driver. My phone is off, so no luck with Find My iPhone, which is strange because I went out with a full charge. My friend is unable to find it at his place, so I reach out to the driver. I try him a few times throughout the day and I either get his voicemail or he answers and immediately hangs up. I understand they work weird hours, so no alarms yet. Finally, I get through and he confirms he has the phone but says he cannot meet today. When I ask when he can meet, he starts to pretend he cannot hear me and just says hello, hello before hanging up. I try him the rest of Saturday and Sunday, getting the same voicemail/hang-up run around. I reach out to Uber, who reaches out to him directly, asking about my items. Monday morning, Uber tells me he doesn't have them, and despite me telling them that he confirmed that he did on Saturday, they were about as helpful as you would expect. I get a hold of the driver Monday afternoon after repeated attempts, which is only the second time I've ever spoken to him at this point. His story is now that he doesn't have them, and when I say I'm gonna get the cops involved, he hesitates for a second, but then doubles down and says he can prove he does not have them. I filed a police report and then, as a last-ditch effort, decide to take the number I got from his answering machine — Uber connects you via phone rather than giving you their number — and text him, offering $200 for my items returned, no questions asked. Well guys, as luck would have it, he found my phone and wallet. My offer must have made them magically appear out of thin air. I grab $200 from the bank and we arrange a meeting time, which he repeatedly moves. I'm having to do this all without a phone, so shout out to my lovely wife for coordinating this all. He is apparently very excited during this call and is asking how his reward will be paid. I wait in the rain for an hour for this guy in a sea of downtown Chicago Ubers. Then I finally spot his car, confirm it's him, and jump into the front seat. I pull out the money and ask to see my stuff, which he pulls out of his center console and places near me. I start counting the money on my lap, and once I reach $200, I pick it up, take my wallet and phone and say, "Here you go," without actually handing it to him. I book it out the car and don't look back. I go the opposite way he is facing so that he cannot follow me and make my way to a pedestrian-only courtyard. Surprise, surprise, my phone is turned off with plenty of battery left, which means he turned it off so I could not find it. I feel for Uber drivers who have to deal with customers leaving stuff behind, but I would have happily have worked with him to make it as convenient as possible to return my things. However, refusing to coordinate and then lying about having things that you find is theft, and it felt great to pull a fast one on this a-hole. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I am very happy that in Thailand this is unfortunately pretty much never happening. Actually, the opposite is the case here. Every couple of weeks or so you have a news story where some kind of poor taxi driver finds the wallet of a rich tourist or something and gives it back to him or her. That is something I really appreciate about Thailand. Either way, the next one is titled "Neighbor is Intrusive." I, female 27, live in a house with my husband. I'm a heavy smoker, but I don't smoke in the house because my husband does not like the smell. And I also don't want him breathing secondhand smoke. He is a non-smoker. I usually smoke cigarettes in our backyard. However, one of our neighbors slid a passive-aggressive note through our letterbox last week, saying something along the lines of, "My children just wanted to play in our backyard. Thanks for exposing them to cancer. I hope you're happy." I had no idea which neighbor this was, none of our neighbors had talked to us about this. I decided to ignore the note and continue to smoke in my backyard. Then 4 days ago, one of our neighbors knocked on our door and complained and said I should not smoke in my backyard because their kids play in their backyard. I think my neighbor is being unreasonable. Our backyards are pretty large and I smoke right in the center of my backyard, so the smoke has more space to disperse. I think my neighbor is only complaining because they can see me smoking over our fence. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would say OP is definitely not in the wrong here, and that's coming from me. I never smoke. I have smoked a few cigarettes in my life, but I'm really not a big fan. But honestly, if you're smoking outside, especially on your own property, I don't know what kind of right the neighbors would have to complain about this. Either way, let me know what you think about it in the comments. A user in the comments said, "Not the a-hole, it's your yard, you are outside, definitely NTA. Also, no judgment, but I hope you quit one day for your own health." Next comment, "Everyone sucks here. I cannot stand the smell of cigarette smoke and would be highly annoyed if I had a neighbor who did this all the time. By your own admission, you're a heavy smoker. That means you're outside smoking throughout the day, not giving the other people in your neighborhood the opportunity to enjoy their property smoke-free. If it was once in a while, that would be one thing, but all day, every day? Sorry, you're the a-hole here. And by the way, the smell of cigarette smoke to non-smokers is much stronger than you think it is. When I'm outside, I can tell if there's someone in my vicinity who is smoking. I can also tell who's a smoker by the way their clothes smell. I guarantee you that if they are complaining, they can smell the smoke. That said, it's your property. Maybe you could work something out with the neighbors where you don't smoke at certain times when the children are playing outside. They cannot demand that you never smoke in your yard, but you should not be exposing their kids to unpleasant, cancerous chemicals." And the next one is titled, "Cursed My Neighbor." This week, I, 28 female, hosted a family gathering. The people there were my sister and her family, 4 in total, my brother and his wife, my boyfriend, and mine and his parents. I live relatively out in the country, so it's not exactly common for whole properties to be fenced. Usually it's just fences for animals. Since it was nice out, we ate lunch outside. Some of the food was not immediately brought inside after we ate, including some desserts that were mostly chocolate and a bit of fruit. I figured the food would probably be fine being left out for a little bit, and if not, it could just be thrown away. The food was covered too, and after we ate, we went down to the small pond that's on my property for a little bit, probably half an hour or 45 minutes. It has a nice dock and view of the trees and is a great place to spend some time. When we got back up to where the food was left, the neighbor's dog was on the table, eating the food and had ripped the covers off. I got my neighbors and they apologized but asked what the dog had eaten. I told them some of the food was toxic to dogs, chocolate, grapes, etc. They started freaking out and rushed their dog to the vet. Yesterday, they contacted me and asked if I would pay the vet bills. Long story short, their dog survived but needed extensive care and had racked up quite a bit in vet bills. I offered to pay a quarter of the bills, but they wanted all of it because the food she ate was mine. I told them if they hadn't let their dog on my property, it wouldn't have eaten my food. They said that it had accidentally gotten out and they didn't mean to, and that I should pay the bills. I then made a remark about how they should pay for the food the dog ate, but they were not amused and got more upset. I told them a quarter or nothing, and they are still upset about it and want me to pay more. I did leave the food out though, so am I the a-hole for not paying the full costs? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. A comment on Reddit said, not the a-hole. It is their dog, they let it out accidentally, they failed to supervise their pet. The fact that the trouble the dog got into happened to be on your property does not make you responsible here. It's the responsibility of the pet owner to keep their pet safe. Full stop. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, but for the fact they didn't contain their dog, it would not have gotten sick. You did not intentionally feed the dog anything. And yeah, Ripe Stars, this is clearly people that probably should not have a dog because they are blaming others for their neglect. And the next one is titled, Would I be the a-hole if I got my annoying neighbors evicted because of their dog that barks 24/7 constantly? So, I have lived in my apartment for 9 months now. It is absolutely perfect except for one thing. My neighbor's barking dog. My neighbor lives in the building next to me, but our buildings are connected and we share a wall on our kitchens, dining rooms, although I use mine as an office, bathrooms and bedrooms. Their dog barks non-stop in their kitchen and dining room when they are not home, and as a consequence I have a hard time focusing on my homework when I get home from class. If I make the slightest noise in my kitchen, the dog goes off for hours after, so I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home because of their dog. I left a note for them for the first time a few months after I moved in. It was after 10 PM and the dog just would not stop barking, which I felt was ridiculous. The note was not aggressive, I even suggested the dog might just be bored. I said I know it is hard to know what your dog does when you're not home, so I cut them some slack. But I did remind them about the quiet enjoyment provision in our leases, and I am an MD, so this means landlords have the duty to control their tenants' noise. After about a month, nothing had changed, so I put in a complaint with the landlord and the barking stopped for a week. Then it started back up again. I put up with this for a few more months and I put in another complaint with the landlord because it was obvious that they were not taking any steps to solve the issue. Everyone got a letter from the landlord that said the next time they get a complaint about the dog, the person whose dog it is gets a 30-day notice to evict. I found this odd since I told them specifically what apartment it was coming from, so I don't know why every apartment got a letter. The dog, however, never stopped. I don't want to get these people evicted because of their dog, so I left another note for them. Non-threatening, basically the same as the first note. But I again told them that I'm going to have to complain to the landlord if it doesn't stop. The dog stopped for about a week again, but now it is back to the usual. I have put up with this for so long, I don't know what else to do. I don't want to get them evicted, but they clearly don't care about the noise their dog makes. So, would I be the a-hole if I put in another complaint with my landlord, possibly resulting in their eviction? And a user in the comments said, not the a-hole, you have given them numerous chances to correct their dog's barking, they just don't care. You've been fairly reasonable and they are continuing to break their lease by having a noise nuisance. You are not getting them evicted, they are getting themselves evicted for repeatedly ignoring the request from the landlord to correct the issue. And another user said, not the a-hole, they know it is a problem and have been given multiple chances to fix it. They simply don't care. At this point, they have no one to blame but themselves if another complaint leads to eviction. It is a basic courtesy thing. Update to the story posted by OP, I showed the landlord an audio recording of the constant barking and let's just say he was not happy. 2 months after my original post, the neighbors are now gone. I kind of feel bad for them. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.